Good afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network radio show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNC Radio.live, where we offer the news, weather, traffic, entertainment, and information our commercial drivers want to hear. We often feature outstanding authors on the show. Rocket Boys is a #1 New York Times best-selling memoir that inspired the film October Sky. It's a uniquely American memoir that's a powerful, luminous story of coming of age at the dawn of the 1960s. It's a story of a group of young men who dreamed of launching rockets into outer space and who made those dreams come true. That book was written by retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam, who worked on the Hubble Space Telescope, trained U.S. and Japanese astronauts, and helped negotiate the use of the International Space Station with the Russians. He's a decorated Vietnam vet. He flew with General Chuck Yeager. He carried the Olympic torch and even taught David Letterman to scuba dive. Homer's book Rocket Boys is considered one of the most beloved bestsellers in recent years. It's a uniquely American chronicle of triumph. Homer is with us today to talk about that book and others he's written. Welcome, Homer. It's an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, hi, Shelley. It's an honor to be with you and all the truckers out there.
You have had such a fascinating life, and you really did chronicle it in Rocket Boys. It made for such an inspiring movie. Did you always want to be a rocket scientist, and were your parents pleased?
Hey, well, you know, when you start talking about the movie, I have to, a lot of times when I go out and make speeches and so on, I'll look out in the audience and I'll see a lot of disappointed young women out there. And I have to actually apologize to them for not being Jake Gyllenhaal, you know, who played me in the movie. So,
so you actually get to answer the question that people always ask. You know, if somebody was to play you in the movie, who would you want it to be?
Well, yeah, I can answer that, Jake Gyllenhaal. And you know, if they ever made a movie on the grown-up Homer, I could now ask him to play me again. You know, so it'd be cool. But you know, getting back to your question on whether I always wanted to be a rocket scientist or anything like that. No, I didn't. I was, I grew up in this little town, Colwood, West Virginia, down in the southern part in the coal fields there. And I had no clue about what I wanted to do with my life. I was the youngest. I was the emergency backup son. My older brother, Jim, was perfect in every way, big football star and handsome and all that. So I was just like the backup there, and I knew it. I was a nearsighted little nerdy guy and loved to read, loved to write. But when I was 14 years old, the Russians launched Sputnik. And it was just the most amazing thing, because I've read a lot of science fiction. It was like, oh my gosh, science fiction is really coming real here. And so I told my mom I wanted to watch Sputnik because I read in the paper that Sputnik was going to fly over Colwood of all places. And I told my mom I was going to go out that night and watch it. And somehow the word got out pretty much that little Sonny, as I was called back then, was going to watch Sputnik in his backyard. And the people of Colwood, a lot of people in Colwood thought, well, the only place they could see it was in my backyard. So they showed up, and my dad walked out on the porch and said, Elsie, why are all these people in our backyard? And she said, well, they've come to help Sonny watch Sputnik fly over. And my dad laughed and said, well, they can all just go home, because I know President Eisenhower never let anything Russian fly over Colwood. But the President Eisenhower was not in charge of the law of physics, and sure enough, it did fly right over Colwood. Beautiful view of it, and to me, it was the most amazing thing. And I decided right then I wanted to be part of that, and that's why I decided to start building rockets.
Wow. So did you blow a few things up by accident, or? As far as I was concerned, there was accidents, but my parents took it as being on purpose. But, you know, one of the first things that the boys, I gathered these boys I'd grown up with, they were all coal miner son like me in West Virginia there. Gathered them together, and we decided we were going to build a rocket. Had no clue how to build a rocket, but you know what? It's a lot easier to build a bomb than a rocket. We discovered that right away. And the first thing I did was to blow up my mom's
rose garden fence. She loved these roses. She worked so hard to raise these roses. So not only took out the fence, but it took out some of her rose bushes too. And so she came out. Well, my dad, half of Colwood came out on their back porches. They thought the Russians had decided to start World War III and attack Colwood to begin with. And when they saw what had happened, they all went back inside. And so did my dad. He said, "You handle this, Elsie." And so Mom walked out there, and my little dog was just quivering beside me. Her name was Poteet, by the way. We named her after Poteet, Texas, of all places. And little Poteet was quivering there. And so I figured Mom was just going to, well, the other boys had run away because there's a big hole in the fence for them to get through. And so I expected her to just kill me on the spot. But instead, she asked me if I could if I thought I could really build a rocket. And I thought by all the evidence, including, her rose garden there, that I had no clue how to build a rocket. And she said, "Well, you know what, your dad, they expect after you get through high school for you just to go to work in the mine. And I think you're better than that. And I've saved up my money and I can send you through college, but we only have a joint bank account, so your dad would have to sign the check too, and he wouldn't agree to it if he didn't think you were worth it. So why don't you figure out how to build a rocket?" So that started that night, me gathering these boys back together again, and a couple other boys, especially Quentin, who was the prototypical nerd of all time. And knew everything, right? So I gathered them all in together, and we started actually learning how to build rockets until, from blowing up my mom's rose garden fence, our last rocket went over 6 miles high.
Wow. So where did you get all the information for this? Were you going to the library and doing a lot of analysis? I mean, that's not just something people start doing from scratch, I wouldn't think.
No, not really. It's difficult even today. And you can imagine what it was like back in the 1950s. There wasn't the internet to look things up, which is probably a good thing. But we figured to pick Quentin's brain. Quentin, like I said, was such a nerd and read every book in the library. Okay. And but all he knew really was that the Chinese had first built rockets and they'd use black powder. And so from that, and maybe some pictures in Life magazine, which kind of showed us what a rocket looked like, we started trying to understand how to make black powder. And it turned out that we could get almost all the ingredients in the company store. The primary ingredient, the oxidizer, is potassium nitrate, but it's known as saltpeter. Mm-hmm. And we could actually buy saltpeter in the company store. I don't know why it was there. I don't even want to think why it was there, but I didn't ask any questions. We just bought it. We started mixing up our own black powder. But ultimately, and we had a little bit of luck with that, but ultimately we had a wonderful science teacher over at Big Creek High School, where we went 2 mountains away. Everything in West Virginia is not by miles, but the number of mountains between you and wherever you're going. Yep. So it was 2 mountains away, and at Big Creek, and Miss Riley, our Miss Frida Riley, our wonderful science teacher, was only about 5 or 6 years older than us boys, beautiful young woman, took an interest in us, and she ultimately got us a book called Fundamentals of Guided Missile Design. And it required a working knowledge of calculus and differential equations just to get through the first page. And I personally was having trouble with algebra at the time. But she procured that book for us out of her own pocket and handed it over, and we were determined to learn it. So everything in it. So that ultimately gave us a guide on how to build these very sophisticated advanced rockets using some very sophisticated propellants.
Wow. And so where did you go from there? Obviously, you got the attention from a lot of academics and so forth, I would imagine, as well as the neighbors.
Well, we did go to the National Science Fair as the movie. Well, the book, of course, tells what really happened. The movie tells it too. And we won a gold and silver medal there. Did very, very well. Made Miss Riley very happy because her idea, Big Creek was known as a sports school. It was a football school. And when you walked in that high school, there was a trophy case from one end of the hall to the other, just filled with mostly football trophies, but also basketball and track and all that kind of thing. And she thought there ought to be something in there really for the students who weren't athletes. And so her idea was that we would just go to like the county science fair and maybe get a third place ribbon or something. She'd have something that she could put in that trophy case. It astonished her as much as everybody else that we not only won the county, but the state, and then got that gold medal in the national science fair. So that made her happy and made us happy as well.
Well, I can't wait to learn more about your life. This is fascinating already. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam and the author of Rocket Boys. This is the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up.
This info blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 6 things to consider before starting your career in trucking. Truck drivers are often referred to as the backbone of America. They haul roughly 70% of America's freight. Nearly every good consumed in the United States has been shipped by a truck. Right now, the demand for truck drivers is higher than ever. The growing truck driver shortage in America is a topic of concern and has been for the past 4 years. The United States is in dire need of people to start driving trucks. Are you considering becoming a truck driver, but not quite sure if it's the career path for you? Here are 6 things potential truck drivers need to know before starting their career in the trucking industry. Know your why. Why do I want to become a truck driver? Is one of the first questions you should ask yourself before starting your career in trucking. Knowing and understanding your why is important so that you make sure that trucking is something you'll enjoy. Nothing is more draining than working in a career field that you're not passionate about and excited about. Truck drivers are already more likely to struggle with mental health problems because of the trucking lifestyle. So to avoid dreading your trucking career, ask yourself, why do I want to be a truck driver? Long work hours. It's obvious that truck drivers spend a majority of their workday in the driver's seat, but many new drivers don't realize how hard it can be sitting for long periods. Drivers spend hours upon hours sitting down. This can result in leg, back, and neck pain. If you're the type of person who cannot handle sitting down for several hours at a time, then truck driving is not for you. Another thing to consider is how long a typical workday is for a truck driver. Drivers are legally allowed to work 14 hours a day, but are limited to 11 hours of driving time. They must take a mandatory 30-minute break by the 8th hour of duty. Following the long workday, drivers must have 10 hours of off-duty time. In a work week, drivers cannot exceed more than 60 hours of work or 70 hours over 8 days. Failure to follow these HOS rules can result in being shut down, fines, and lower carrier safety ratings. A new lifestyle. There's not a career quite like trucking. It's nothing like your typical 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job. It's long hours, days, and most times weeks away from home. Truck drivers often experience loneliness, depression, and anxiety. If you're someone who's used to working with many people, then truck driving will be a shock. Drivers will go days or weeks without seeing their loved ones, and it can really take a toll on truckers, especially those who are new. Adjusting to this lifestyle can be challenging at first, but once you do, you can live a rewarding life as a truck driver. Getting seat time. The more experience you have as a truck driver, the better. With more experience, you'll land better truck driving jobs and better pay. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, truck drivers earn an average of over $40,000 a year. Yet, many trucking companies advertise higher rates of pay for experienced drivers. Over time, you can negotiate a higher rate per mile. Your relationships will suffer. It doesn't matter if you're on the road or at home. Make time for family. Make it a priority to talk to someone in your family once a day. It can be tough for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to maintain relationships with their families due to the trucking lifestyle. Keeping in contact with your loved ones will help life on the road be less lonely. Lack of sleep. Getting the recommended amount of sleep each night is a rare thing for truckers. Although sleep may be difficult for truckers because of the uncomfortable way of living, it's essential to their well-being and safety. Make it a priority to get good sleep and make a sleep schedule. Set an alarm for a certain time and turn off all electronics and get your much-needed sleep. Not getting enough sleep makes life on the road miserable. Although there may seem like many downsides, truck driving can be a very rewarding and exciting career. As a truck driver, you have freedom on the open road and a chance to see America's most beautiful places. For information on trucking, be sure to check out the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam, who's the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. Homer's life is just plain fascinating. I mean, who designs a rocket as a kid? He did, and he got the state's attention and everything else. And then you ended up working in NASA, Homer. I was wondering if you could tell us more about your adventures, how you got into NASA, ended up working on the Hubble telescope, negotiated the International Space Station with the Russians, flew with Chuck Yeager. I mean, any one of these things would be just phenomenal for one person, but you've done it all.
Well, happily enough, I just wrote another memoir called "Don't Blow Yourself Up" that describes how I ended up there. It took me a while. I was actually 38 years old before I started working for NASA. First thing I had to do was go off to engineering school, and my mom sent me off to Virginia Tech, which was known as VPI back then. And it was a military college, so I went there and famously built this giant cannon that they still use every time Virginia Tech happens to score a touchdown. They fire the skipper, as it was called. Story very similar to Rocket Boys in a lot of ways, where I gathered in some other cadets, 3 other cadets, and we decided to build this big cannon because our arch rival, Virginia Military Institute, had a little cannon, and every time that we played them in football, their cadet corps on the other side would after they fired their cannon, would yell out to us, "Where's your cannon? Where's your cannon?" So we decided to build this thing. We did it without any support and actually some opposition from Virginia Tech's administration. And come the big game in 1963. We dragged the skipper out there, and when they started chanting, "Where's your cannon? Where's your cannon?" I put in a triple charge in the skipper. It went off. A shockwave went across the football field right up through their cadet corps, blew all their hats off, and cracked the glass on the other side of the stadium in the press box. And then after our ears stopped ringing, our cadet corps started chanting, "Here's our cannon. Here's our cannon." and so it makes for a good. It's actually a true story, and it's like, well, people have said, "Well, gosh, we should make a movie about that." But I said, well, it's a little close to October Sky in a lot of ways, but that's in the new book. And then I went off to Vietnam after that. I was in the 4th Infantry Division over there. I was involved with a couple of big battles. I was there for the Tet Offensive of 1968, and I write about that in the new memoir as well. And after that, I became a scuba instructor, actually, and taught scuba diving all over the world, and ultimately went over to Germany. I was an engineer over in Germany for a while, and NASA hired me out of Germany for a couple of different reasons. One was to work as a scuba instructor in the neutral buoyancy simulator at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, and the other was to help them design the Space Lab, which was a laboratory that went in the shuttle cargo bay. And that ultimately led me to training the astronauts for Hubble Space Telescope deployment, and then the repair. And then I ended up going over to Russia and working with the Russians on the negotiating the International Space Station. So yeah, I had a very interesting career, needless to say.
How was it to negotiate with the Russians at that time?
It was interesting. These were the same guys that had launched Sputnik. They were still there after all these years. I mean, our Apollo guys, they'd long since retired, gone off to Florida. But here were these dour old Germans or Russians sitting across the table there in Moscow. The Soviet Union had fallen. They were in tough times. They didn't have any money or anything, and they were having to deal with these young American squirts, And I was actually one of the older folks. I was in my 50s by then. That were negotiating with them, and they would refuse to agree to anything. I don't care how innocuous it was. They just niet. Where you deal with the Russians is the party afterwards, and after every meeting day, there is always a party, and the vodka starts to flow. And so I made common cause with them by complimenting them about Sputnik and how that had started my interest in space. And they loved that. They really did. And they said, a couple of them pulled me aside and said, Homer, would you like to see Sputnik? And I went, yes, I actually saw it back in 1957. Thank you very much. It was right over Colwood. And they said, no, we built two. And you'd like to see one. And I go, what? And they go, yeah, there were two of them, and they picked one randomly. And so they had the other one in a warehouse. Now it's in a museum. They took me over there and showed it to me. And it was like, well, this is heaven sent. This is kind of meant to be. Here I am. They didn't care. I reached out and touched this artifact from all these years that could have been Sputnik that started the whole space age. So that was pretty cool. And we did finally, pin them down on some agreements, and we figured out how we were going to operate the space station and train the astronauts and so on. Wow.
So you were a diplomat too.
Well, you learn, it's kind of interesting. I had some experience I was over in Germany and working with the Germans. And then I went to Japan and trained their first astronauts and worked with all of them. And so you learn after a while, before you can do any of this, you have to negotiate with them how you're going to do it. And you learn after a while some of their tricks. The Japanese love to get you to agree to what they wanted you to agree to on the second day you're there, because that's when jet lag hits you. And so we learned pretty soon not to agree to anything on the second day at all, and just rest up before we agreed to anything. And the Russians, again, you have to drink with them. You have to drink with them a lot before they will agree to anything. So they just want to take the measure of you as a man and or woman, see how tough you are, see how much they can push you around. And they will push you to the limit, but ultimately, if you're patient and are really to stand there toe to toe with them, you can come to an agreement.
Interesting. Maybe we need you over there now to do some negotiations. Gosh.
Well, we need to stop this war. There's no question about it. This is an awful, horrendous, horrible thing that's happening over there. And again, when I was in Russia, I did. My heart, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I served in the military during the height of the Cold War, but my heart went out to the Russians. They were in really, really sad shape there in the mid 1990s. And to a certain extent, I think they still are. They struggle with their economy. They struggle with the people that end up being their leaders, which are invariably autocrats. Russian people are good people, but they're certainly on the wrong side of this latest war.
Yes, absolutely. You also flew with Chuck Yeager. I wanted to find out about that, and then I was going to throw it to Tom, who said he had a question for you too.
Okay. Chuck, General Yeager, as he liked to be called, of course, he's a West Virginia icon, the man who broke the sound barrier for the first time ever. It was in, I think it was around 2006. I was asked to go down to Max. I'd already met Chuck Yeager up at Marshall University. He has a scholarship up there. And so I had met him in kind of a formal situation, but I was asked to go down to Maxwell Air Force Base and be honored by something called the Gathering of the Eagles, where the aerospace pioneers are honored. And so I went down there, and there were all these icons of aviation, including General Chuck Yeager. And so Yeager walks up to me and he says, "So, Homer, what are you doing here?" And I go, "Well, I wrote this book, called Rocket Boy." And he said, "Do you know how to fly?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I got my private pilot's license." "Well, let's go flying." So he had a T6 trainer down there, and he and his wingman, Bud Anderson, had another T6, and my wife Linda was with me, and so Bud and Linda got in the T6, and they took off, and they just stayed nice and level, and all that kind of stuff. It was wonderful. And I took off with Yeager, and we get up there, and so he calls back and says, "So, Homer, what would you like to do?" And I went, "Well, whatever you want to do, General, And he said, "Well, you know what I want to do? I want to wring this puppy out." And I thought to myself, uh-oh. So he started doing all kinds of acrobatics. I know he was trying to make me sick, but I'm a scuba instructor. I've been on a lot of bouncy dive boats. I do not typically get sick. And also I've been on the Bomber Comet, the KC-135 0G airplane a lot. So it didn't bother me. And next thing I know, we're actually falling tail first out of the sky toward the Maxwell Air Force Base golf course. And what went through my mind was, oh my gosh, if we auger in, I'm going to get second billing in the Charleston Gazette. Yeager crashes, and there was this fellow named Hickam with him, so, but we survived and actually got to be pretty good friends over the years.
That's amazing. Tom, I know you have a question, but I see we have to go to break. Do you want me to throw it to you when we come back after break?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk after break.
That sounds great. I love your stories, Homer, and I want to hear some more here. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam and the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. Stay tuned for more of the Truckers Network radio show right here on tncradio.live.
This info blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Mental health resources for truck drivers. Truck drivers are the backbone of America. They're the unsung heroes. Nearly every good consumed in the United States has been transported in a truck. Because of how challenging truck driving is, truck drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers will have among each other. The truth is, truck drivers are human. They have their emotional and mental struggles just like every other working American. The only difference is that truck drivers face unique factors that put them more at risk for depression and other serious mental health issues. According to the Transport Workers Union, 1 in 5 truck drivers has experienced mental health issues. Depression and anxiety are the top mental issues that truck drivers face. Mental health resources for truck drivers. With truck drivers spending more time on the road than at home, it can be difficult to get help for their mental health struggles. Now, thanks to modern-day technology, truck drivers can get help right from their smartphones. Esper. Esper is a national behavioral health company with a mission to help people and organizations reach their full potential. Esper offers a continuum of behavioral health care from acute to chronic health conditions to leadership development, including Fit to Pass, a coaching program to assist professional drivers in maintaining good health and pass their DOT recertification physical exams. BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest e-counseling platform. They have access to licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board-licensed professional counselors. To get starters, take a quick questionnaire and BetterHelp will match you with a therapist that's right for you. Mutts for Trucks. Mutts for Trucks is an organization that helps truck drivers find the perfect four-legged friend for the road. Their mission is to bring more good to a community that brings so much good to us. It's been proven that owning a dog can drastically decrease isolation, depression, and cardiovascular disease. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their number is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. If you feel that you need help for your mental health struggles while on the road, we also recommend reaching out to your carrier and seeing what options they may have available for you. For more information on mental health, go to the blog section at The Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hello, everybody. This is Todd Dewey from Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel, and I love to listen to TNC Radio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNC Radio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam, who's the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. Homer's been telling us some terrific stories about his life. Tom, you said you had a question for Homer.
Yeah, Homer, first of all, thanks again for being with us today. It's really exciting to have you here. One of the things that I had not put this together, the title of the book versus the title of the movie. So I like the title Rocket Boys, but the movie was renamed October Sky, which, as I understand, is an anagram of Rocket Boys. How did that happen?
Well, the movie was made as Rocket Boys. If you'll look at one of the old screenplays, and I've got an autographed version of that, and I've got proof of it because it says Rocket Boys right on the screenplay on every page. So that was the plan. And of course, an author really, if you're going to make a movie out of somebody's book, the author naturally wants the title of the movie to be the same as the book. I mean, otherwise you're going to have to go around the rest of your life and say, yeah I wrote Rocket Boys. That October Sky thing. So I really didn't want the title to be changed, but they had some test audiences while they were still editing the movie. And it turned out that a lot of the audiences didn't like the title, the Rocket Boys. And then also there was a really bad movie that came out the summer of 98 called Rocket Man, not the Elton John bio.
I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
But it's just a really bad movie. Yeah. So they thought, we don't want them to get it confused with that. So we better come up with another title. And of course, the Russians launched Sputnik in October in the October Sky. But what had really happened was the director of Rocket Boys, Joe Johnston, just idly trying to figure out what are we going to call this movie, put in Rocket Boys and pushed a key on the computer for anagrams just to try to get some thought in his mind going. And out popped the only really good anagram of Rocket Boys is October Sky. And he said, Eureka, that's it. We're going to call it October Sky. So he and Chuck Gordon, the producer, called me and they said, Homer, we've got it. We're going to call your movie October Sky. What do you think? And I said, guys, I hate that title. I really hate it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, if you call it October Sky, I'm not going to have anything to do with this movie. And in unison, they both said, great, we knew you'd love it, and hung up. So that's about how they paid attention to me the entire filming of that movie, by the way.
Yeah. Were there other things that were really different between the book you had written and the movie that you felt like, oh man, they really missed it, or that never happened? Was there something else like that?
No, I mean, the one thing I don't like to burst the bubble of people who love that movie, because I love it too. It is different from the book, but movies are a different art form than the book, and so you have to take some shortcuts sometimes, and you do things for dramatic effect, that so on. One thing that they did I didn't like, and I still whine about to this day, is that they called my dad John. His name was Homer, just like mine. I was called Sonny growing up. And then also they made the Elsie character, my mom, that character quite a bit weaker than she really was. My mom dominated our household. She's the one that kept us going with building the rockets and so on, and a very, very strong, powerful woman. And so they did kind of diminish her personality a little bit. But Natalie Kennedy did the best that she could. She played, according to the script, she played She played mom in the movie. And my mom actually came on set one day, and Natalie said, "Oh, I really want to meet your mom." And so after a scene, we took Natalie over to visit with mom, and my mom took one look at Natalie and said, "Well, I was hoping for Kathy Bates, but I guess you'll do." And Natalie was very gracious. But it's like, Mom, you don't actually have to say everything that you think. But everybody just loved my mom on set. They just really took care of her. So she had a great day.
That's wonderful. Great. So were you pleased with the overall movie?
Oh, yes. I mean, absolutely. It has inspired millions across the world. It is still shown on all the cable channels. Constantly. I still get letters from all around the world, from India and China and South America and Europe, everywhere, saying, "Oh, I just saw the movie," and these are young people, this movie's over 20 years old, but people still love it, and it inspires them, and has turned out, I don't know, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of engineers, probably. I don't know if they hate me for that or not, but it has. And also it just inspires people. So I certainly can't have any criticism of that movie. It's done very, very well.
That's so neat. So, I mean, you're creating a legacy as you go along. This is awesome. I mean, you're influencing so many people's lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just lived my life, and I always wanted to write. And I started writing when I was in third grade. And my first book, by the way, was not Rocket Boys. It was a book called Torpedo Junction, which was about the U-boat wars up and down the East Coast. And it's still in print. It came out in 1989. I researched that for 15 years. I dived on all those wrecks off North Carolina. I dived those U-boat wrecks off North Carolina and corresponded with the U-boat crews. So ultimately I wanted to write, but I had a gap between Torpedo Junction and Rocket Boys because I got real busy with NASA over in Japan and Russia. But I was writing. I was still writing, and I was writing some short articles for a magazine called Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine. And I got a call one night from the editor, Pat Trenner, who asked me did I have something really, really short that she needed as a filler for the next issue. And I looked across on my desk, and something just clicked in my head. I had one artifact left from the rockets that we built in Coalwood, an old rocket nozzle, and I was using it for a paperweight. And I said, I could write you, I don't know, 1,500 words, maybe 2,000. When I was a boy that grew up in West Virginia, and I built rockets. And Pat Trenner was completely, totally, utterly underwhelmed with this idea, but she said, "Go ahead, you see what you can do." And I wrote it overnight. As I wrote it, all of these memories that I'd forgotten just started flooding out of me. I remembered, about blowing up my mom's rose garden fence and Miss Riley and the other boys and so on. And so the next day after I faxed it up to her, Pat called and said, "Homer, you're really onto something with this story. Half my office is laughing at it, and the other half is crying. So we're going to make this a major feature." So that was the first time after all those years that I had thought about this story. And as soon as it came out, I started hearing from New York publishers that said, "Are you going to write a memoir about this?" And I said, "Well, I guess I am now." And it didn't take too long before Hollywood started knocking on my door too. So I think it was just one of those kismet things, one of those things that was meant to be, whether I planned on it or not.
You were destined to do it. Well, it is amazing. You got a movie as soon as your book was being written or published. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was talking to the screenplay writer while I was still writing chapters, and I was sending him out chapters. Louis Kolek's his name, great screenplay writer. And so that's that among the facts that the way you write a screenplay is a lot different from the way you write a book makes why, but there are some differences between the two. But when Rocket Boys as soon as Rocket Boys came out, it was amazing its reception, and ultimately ended up #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And so I've gone on. I've written 17 more books since then. So I'm this latest, Don't Blow Yourself Up, was number 19. So
excellent.
I love it. I love writing, and I've had a good life, and I'm very appreciative to the good Lord for that. Needless to say.
And we're very honored to talk to you, because this is just super interesting. And you don't encounter people like you, Homer, who've done so many things, so many marvelous things, and lived all kinds of different lives, essentially. You've got a movie right in your life there. It's super, super interesting, and it's inspirational to so many people. I think you're inspiring a lot of dreams, which that's something that I think people could use today.
Well, I hope so. I mean, when I autograph one of my books, or especially Rocket Boys, I always say to keep aiming high. And that's what you have to do. You have to figure out that whatever you want to accomplish, there are going to be roadblocks along the way. There's going to be problems. It's not ever going to be just fall in your lap. You have to work hard for it. Yeah. But you gotta figure out what's your passion. What is it you really, really want to do? And then you can roadmap it at that point. You can come up with your plan. I call it the 3 P's of success. You have passion, then planning, and then ultimately perseverance makes the difference. There are probably a lot better writers than I am out there. I know there are, but that never got published. Because somewhere along the line, they just decided, well, it's not going to happen, and they give up and go off and do other things. But I persevered, and that's kind of a West Virginia trait, I guess. I don't know.
Tenacity. It's always a good thing. And you know how to set your trajectory, correct?
Yes. To coin a new metaphor. Yes, absolutely.
Right. We have to go to break here. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam and the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. We're going to talk about his memoir when we come back. He's got a new one. This is also very fascinating. So definitely stay tuned to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. We'll be back.
This blog on TNC Radio is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The 5 best truck stops in America. Truck drivers spend days, sometimes weeks, out on the road. Sometimes taking a break at a nice truck stop's a great way to relax and take your mind off driving. There are many truck stops across the United States, but we listed the 5 best truck stops that every trucker needs to stop and experience. Little America, Wyoming. The Little America Truck Stop is located in Little America, Wyoming. It's a mini-chain truck stop with several locations throughout the country for truckers to enjoy. Little America offers a wide variety of services to truck drivers. Some of the services include service truck roadside repair, tire repair, new tires, wheel seals, oil changes, water pumps, brakes, courtesy property shuttle, AC repairs, belts, DOT inspections, and trailer tarp installation. Iowa 80, Walcott, Iowa. Iowa 80 is a place where truckers want to stop. It's the world's largest truck stop, and it's filled with tons of activities and tourist attractions. Truck drivers could stop and enjoy a nice meal, watch a movie, or stop by the trucking museum. Iowa 80 also has a full range of truck services and amenities. Some of the services and amenities include cat scale, chiropractor, convenience store, interstate dental, dogomat, fuel center, laundry facility, library, travel service center, truckomat, and a workout room. South of the border, Hammer, South Carolina. Pedro's Truck Stop, also known as Porky's, located in Hammer, South Carolina, is a world-famous roadside attraction for tourists and truck drivers. Pedro's filled with many different activities, unique foods and shopping. It also offers truck drivers supplies, showers, a trucker's lounge, and 24/7 fresh hot coffee. Trails Travel Center, Albert Lee, Minnesota. Trails Travel Center is everything a truck driver needs and amazing food. Some of the Trails Travel Center's food options are a tavern, Cold Stone Creamery, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and McDonald's. Truckers can also stop and shop heavy-duty truck parts or chrome parts. Trails Travel Center also has a truck service that offers drivers wash services, tire services, wheel alignments, and suspension repair. Jubit's, Portland, Oregon. Jubit's is a family-owned truck stop and boasts of being the world's classiest truck stop. They were also recently named the second best rest stop in America. Drivers can enjoy a 24-hour full-service Cascade Grill restaurant, a 100-room hotel, movie theater, barber shop, and more. Jubitz also has a truck service center and is committed to providing truck drivers the best tires, truck maintenance, and truck repair. Some of their services include engine diagnostics, oil change, DOT inspection, glass replacement, metal fabrication, welding, tires, tire service, and airbags. Plus, brake service, truck trailer alignment, shock absorbers, air conditioning maintenance, electrical diagnostics, battery service, suspension repair, electronic logging devices, lubricant service, APU installation, and service. This infoblog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
For the latest in traffic, weather, and information, catch the Morning Grind weekdays right here on tncradio.live. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam, who's the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. Homer, you'd mentioned you have a sequel, Don't Blow Yourself Up. What is that all about? Because I imagine there are going to be a lot of people who will want to read that too.
Well, I hope so. Don't Blow Yourself Up is the true sequel to Rocket Boys. It actually starts right that afternoon after the final big rocket launch of Rocket Boys. And that's shown in the movie October Sky, makes everybody cry, properly so. But then what happened to that boy? And I had heard from a lot of people that just assumed that just as soon as I got out, I went to engineering school and worked for NASA. And I thought, I've got a lot of stories to tell. I'm out on the speech circuit a lot, and I've gone out and told these other stories about building the skipper cannon and some of the stories about Vietnam and then scuba diving, all that. And they really were popular. They liked them. And I thought, okay, especially when the pandemic came around, we were all stuck at home. I thought, now's the time for me to go ahead and put all these stories together. So this takes place from 1960 to the year 2000 when the movie came out, because my life just totally changed after that. But I just wanted to write about all these adventures and maybe give some folks a little bit of inspiration that you can do all these things and make life fun and interesting. And so it was. I thought maybe writing about Vietnam was going to be difficult, because I really had I definitely put that in my rear view mirror. But once I got into it, started recalling all the things that happened over there and all the wonderful, wonderful men that I served with over there, it turned out to be just fine, and to write about it and relive that, because that's basically what you have to do. You have to actually relive these events. They have to be very, very real to you as you write them. And I have, for some reason, a good memory. So Don't Blow Yourself Up came out in October. It's done very, very well, and we're in our second printing now. So I hope folks will get out there and read it.
It's a memorable title. Is it also a piece of advice?
Yes. Don't blow yourself up. That was when I told my parents that I was going to build a rocket. We were all sitting at the kitchen table. And that's one thing that my mom required, was me and my dad and my brother to at least get together once a day, and that was at the supper table. So there we all were, and we would go around the table, and Mom would require each one of us to say what we had done with our day and what we were going to do. And so when it got to be my turn, I said, I'm going to build a rocket. I don't think my dad heard me. He was probably thinking about something that had happened at mine. My brother, who was the big football star and got all the girls, he just laughed because, he just thought I was a stupid kid. But my mom got a real thoughtful look on her face, and she looked over at me and she said, well, don't blow yourself up, which I took as permission to get out there and build that rocket. And of course, we did almost blow ourselves up a few times, and my mom with it, since we were mixing that propellant down in the basement of the house. But over the years, she had occasion after that, especially when I built that cannon at Virginia Tech. It's like, oh my gosh, you really are going to blow yourself up this time. And then over in Vietnam, she worried about me getting blown up. But yeah, that's where where the title comes from.
I would say she was pretty progressive and supportive of you.
My mom was a very progressive woman. She was way ahead of her time. I think one of the reasons that I've had a good life and tried to do a lot things that I was passionate about was that in a lot of ways, I really take after my mom, and she didn't like where she was. She always wanted to get away from Colwood, and I wrote another book called Carrying Albert Home right before this one, which was about my mom and dad before my brother and I were born. My mom actually went to Florida after high school and lived down there for a while with her uncle, and met Buddy Ebsen, who played Uncle Jed in Beverly Hillbillies. And actually, they were boyfriend, girlfriend. And
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So Buddy went off to Hollywood to make his fortune, and my mom went back and married my dad. And Buddy sent her as a wedding present a baby alligator, and from Florida to remind her.
That's an interesting present.
Well, yeah. So mom loved that little alligator, named him Albert, and he grew up so big that he lived in the bathtub, and there was only one bathroom in the house, and so he chased my dad out of the bathroom one day, and Dad went out in the yard and started yelling, "Elsie, it's either me or this alligator." And I like to say, after a week or so of thinking it over, she said, "Okay, well, we got to carry Albert home then." And so Carrying Albert Home is the adventures of Homer and Elsie carrying the alligator Albert from West Virginia to Florida, with a lot of adventures along the way. So you'd like that, Shelley. I think you'd like that book. It's tall family tales. It's called, the subtitle of Carrying Albert Home is The Somewhat True Story of a Man, His Wife, and Her Alligator. Somewhat true. It's like all family stories. You know, if you're attuned to them, and I was very much growing up, to hear these stories about your family, that's something that's missing these days.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents don't tell their kids about what they were like before the kids were born, and what their young life was like. That's something that I hope that Carrying Albert Home would get families to start telling these stories. Tall tales or not, there's always a kernel of truth in every one of them.
Oh, sure. And that's what makes things so fascinating. And then when you're looking back through the family pictures, you understand, oh, that's who they were talking about. You know?
Well, exactly. And my parents met John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway along the way. To hear them tell it,
wow.
I believe it's true. And got caught in a hurricane down in the Keys, which they were going to Orlando, so geography obviously wasn't their strong suit. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, so those were great stories, and they were fun to tell. And then after Carrying Albert Home, I wasn't exactly sure, and that was a very successful novel. I wasn't exactly sure what to do, but again, the pandemic sat me down, and amongst everything were all these photographs from all my other travels and so on. And I decided, you know what, now's the time to write about what happened after Rocket Boys, and how I got to be where I am. And hopefully that'll inspire some folks to who enjoy good stories, but also just to make life as passionate and as joyful as you possibly can.
Which is that's what the people need to have, for sure. And maybe it'll make another great movie. You know? Well,
we'll see. Jake could play me now still. So we're aging together.
So where do people find all of your books, Homer?
Well, we have a website. It's homerhickam.com. Hickam is spelled Hickam. Homerhickam.com. All the books are listed there. And we also, if you need a gift, an autograph book for a gift, my wife and I will be happy to do that and send it right along with you. So there's a shop button on homerhickam.com. And of course, all my books are available out there on Amazon and all the other book outlets and bookstores and so on.
Are any of them an audiobook? I hadn't checked.
Yes, they all are, except the latest, Carrying Albert Home is. It's in a bunch of languages too. But Don't Blow Yourself is not yet, but it's being recorded actually this week. So by Tantor Audiobooks. And so it should be out in about a month.
Awesome. This is so very cool. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Homer. You have had quite the life, and you're still inspiring millions of people. This is so neat.
Well, wonderful to talk to you, Shelley, and you, Tom. And so we're staying busy here in Huntsville. I'm on the board of the Space and Rocket Center. That's the world famous space camp. So we're staying busy over there, and we're open for business. So spacecamp.com for folks that want to send their kids.
What a wonderful organization, spacecamp.com. Thank you so much, Homer. I really appreciate you being on the show. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live.